Hello, I'm Catherine and I'm a history teacher, and this short video is to try and help take some of the stress and pressure out of the decision as to whether to apply to Oxford or Cambridge. For some people, the decision to apply to Oxbridge can be a really brave decision, especially if you're in a school where very few people have ever been to Oxbridge. Maybe nobody has for years. Maybe you're worried that you'll be seen as kind of having ideas above your station. Maybe you've got teachers that are telling you it's not for you. So the decision to apply can be very brave. But equally, for some people, the decision not to apply can be a really brave decision because it's always been expected of you. Maybe in your family, they've expected it of you since you're 4. Maybe you're from a school that is constantly pushing people to apply. So you may decide not to apply, and that could be very brave of you. I think the key to making a good decision about this is to try and take away some of the emotional baggage attached to it and just try and be as clear-sighted and well-informed as possible. How many people do you know who are stressing and agonising about whether to apply to, say, Manchester University or Birmingham or Newcastle? Not many, I'd guess. So why is it that people stress so much about this decision of to apply or not to apply to Oxbridge? Probably a lot of it is to do with media hype surrounding Oxbridge. The press is always intensely interested in Oxbridge. There are lots of myths circulating about both Oxford and Cambridge. And also there's a lot of pressure that comes from people in your life, such as parents, teachers, grandparents perhaps, who are very keen for you to apply or very keen for you not to apply. And so it becomes a very fraught decision. But I think the key to making a good decision is to try and be as clear-sighted and well-informed as possible, and really to make the decision like you would any other university, to try and decide whether you think you'd be happy there, both academically and socially. Don't concentrate too much on whether you're good enough, because if you have the requisite GCSEs and A-level predictions for the course that you want to do, I would just leave it up to the tutors to decide whether you're good enough and trust their decision. So you may well be thinking, if she wants me to treat it just as any other decision for any other university, then why is she here offering tutoring for Oxford and Cambridge applications and a video on whether to apply? Good question. The reason is not because I want to put Oxbridge on a pedestal at all, but just because Oxford and Cambridge have a slightly different admission system to other universities. You'll have to sit a pre-interview test, and you'll have to have an interview if they're going to offer you a place. So a lot of schools and a lot of people devote a lot of time and energy into preparing for this process, so it is worth thinking about it a bit and deciding whether you want to go in for all that preparation before you embark on it, and it does help to be as well prepared as you possibly can. Now, sometimes the decision as to whether or not to apply to Oxford or Cambridge is made harder by the surroundings. So it may be that the thought of dreaming spires makes you go weak at the knees. It may be that it completely puts you off. So what do you feel like when you see images like this? What I would suggest is that if that's your reason for applying, that's not a very good reason, because very soon you just get completely used to it. So if you go to a college that looks very Hogwarts-like, and the dining hall looks like that, and the quads are beautiful and so on, you will appreciate it to begin with, but after a few days, when you're stuck into the work and stuck into socialising, you kind of become a bit oblivious to it, and it's really not such a big factor, and it's definitely not enough to get you through a 3-year degree if you're not happy there. So don't just apply because you like that kind of Dreaming Spires Hogwarts type feel of the place. Similarly though, if that really puts you off, and I know there are lots of people that I've taught that have been put off by that, it's probably not a great reason to be put off either, because I think one thing is you can apply for a college that's much more modern. There are plenty of colleges in both Oxford and Cambridge that don't look at all like the Hogwarts image. And also, even if you do end up, maybe through the pooling system, going to a college with surroundings like that, again, after about a week or so, you just won't really notice it. It'll just become the new normal. Another really difficult issue when you're trying to decide whether to apply for Oxford and Cambridge is the whole issue of diversity. Now, of course, it is very true that Oxbridge has a diversity issue. The colleges don't reflect the social and economic makeup of the country as well as they should. And that's a problem potentially if you come from a background where you're going to be underrepresented in Oxbridge. So obviously I have a very huge temptation to say be the change you want to see in the world, go for it, and it's certainly to the benefit of Oxbridge if you do apply, because they need the brightest people regardless of background, and that makes the whole thing more meritocratic. Obviously though, it's not me that has to live this, so you've got to take the right decision for yourself according to what will make you happy. What I would definitely say though is that often the colleges are more diverse than the media gives them credit for. You will find people from whatever background you come from. You might have to look a bit harder if you come from an underrepresented background, but there are certainly people who are passionately into expanding access to groups that are underrepresented. There are societies for every different type of progressive politics. You will find people like yourself, so I would certainly urge you not to be put off without getting in touch with some people, going online, finding some societies in Oxbridge, maybe chatting to current students, making a decision with the best possible of information. So I can't really tell you whether to apply or not, obviously. It's not the right decision for everybody. For some people it really isn't the right decision, and I completely respect that. And there are certain courses that you may well much prefer at other institutions. So all I can suggest really is, based on my experience of helping sixth formers for many years, there are some good reasons for applying and there are some not so good reasons for applying. So perhaps if you examine your own motives, if you think about your own reasons, then it might help you make the decision. So let's start with a few good reasons for applying. The first good reason for applying has to be to do with your subject. So in this case, history. You have to be really into your subject in order to be happy and to thrive at Oxbridge. So ask yourself, do I really like reading about history, talking about history, writing about history, debating about history? And if the answer is yes, the chances are that you will be happy in that environment, which is pretty intense. So there'll be lots of people that are very keen on their subject. Not necessarily they're completely obsessed with it. Obviously people have other interests too, but you really have to be pretty into your subject in order to be happy there. Ask yourself whether you've ever asked the question to a teacher, do we need to know this for the exam? And if you have asked the question, then maybe Oxbridge isn't the place for you, because there's very much a culture of learning for its own sake and not as a means to an end. So you have to be fairly comfortable with a fairly free and easy approach to syllabuses, and you have to love your subject really for its own sake rather than as a means to an end. The second good reason for applying is that you're very keen on independent learning. Now, lots of teachers in lots of schools will talk about independent learning, it's quite a buzzword. But I don't really mean the kind of independent learning that perhaps you're used to at school. I mean really independent learning. The kind of independent learning where you're just given a sheet with an essay title on it and a reading list and told to go away and write an essay on something you have never thought about before, never read about before, you know nothing about, and just told, see you in a week's time for a discussion with an expert on that subject. That's really independent learning, and if that phases you, then again perhaps that's not that doesn't bode very well for making an application for Oxford and Cambridge. Next reason, obviously Oxbridge have the collegiate system, so Oxford and Cambridge are split into different colleges. You will live in a college and that will be your community. If you like that idea, if you've maybe visited a few colleges or read about it or chatted to people who are there, and you like the thought of living and working in a college alongside academics and research students, and that sort of lifestyle attracts you, then that's a good reason for applying to Oxbridge. Another very obvious good reason is the course that's on offer. So if you like the course structure, if you like the options available, if you like the way that it's delivered, if you like the thought of the tutorial system as it's called at Oxford, or supervision system at Cambridge, that's another good reason for applying, because that is something that's quite unique to Oxford and Cambridge. And that brings me on to the next reason. Good reason for applying, and that is that you're not fazed by the thought of one-to-one sessions, sometimes two-to-one, often one-to-one sessions with a real expert on your subject, where you will pretty much have to hold your own in discussion. If that phases you, then you may not be terribly happy, but there is also the fact that a lot of people at the beginning do get a bit phased by that, but over time manage to sort of get used to it and aren't so intimidated. So ask yourself whether that is your absolute nightmare, or whether you'd enjoy that, or whether that's something that you would find a bit scary to begin with but you could get used to before applying. Another good reason for applying is you are not fazed by the thought of being a big fish, no, I'll say that again, being a small fish in a big pond. Most people who will get into Oxford or Cambridge will have been one of the best at their subject in their school, if not the best. And you won't necessarily find that when you get there. You might find that, you know, you're one of a lot of people of a high standard, that you don't stand out, you're not the best, you might struggle with certain areas of the course that you're doing. If that worries you, if you're the sort of person who really likes to be the cleverest in the room, you're not likely to be happy. So perhaps, again, think twice about applying. And finally, about the other students that you're likely to be with in Oxbridge, I would say that you have to not be fazed again by the thought of being with a lot of people who are quite driven. I don't mean necessarily complete geeks at their subject, not everyone is obsessed with their subject at all, but people do tend to be quite driven by something. So either they're passionate about student politics, or about acting or rowing or something like that, or their subject. And if that intimidates you again, if you're thinking, oh, I'm not sure, I like to be in a more laid back atmosphere, then again maybe it's worth having second thoughts. The worst reason to apply is that pressure is being put on you by your parents, grandparents, or teachers at school, or any other significant people in your life, because quite honestly it's not them that are going to have to sit through 3 years of study, potentially 4 years of study, who are going to have to hold their own in tutorials or supervisions. So it's you that are going to live this, it's you that are going to hopefully enjoy it. So if you really in your heart of hearts know you're only doing this to please somebody else in your life, please think again. You owe it to yourself to make the right decision for you. Another bad reason to apply is the idea that you want to prove yourself. It's a great deal to go through to prove a point, to sit through 3 years of a degree that you don't want to do in a place that you don't want to be. So that's not a very good reason. There are easier ways to prove your intellectual prowess or whatever it is you want to prove than committing yourself to that. And finally, occasionally people apply to Oxford or Cambridge because they somehow feel they deserve it. They sort of feel like this is the reward for years and years of hard work at school. And again, this is a slightly dubious reason for applying, because let's just say the work that you've done so far for your A-levels is nothing really compared to the work that you'll have to do when you're there. So it's much more high-powered, it's much less easy to get your head around. It's just harder when you get there, and I think if you're seeing this as the sort of end point of your education rather than the beginning of a marathon, then again you're probably not going to be happy there. So it's worth bearing all these things in mind. So if after the end of all these considerations you still can't decide whether or not to apply, then my video has failed. Now, what I would suggest to do is to apply anyway, because if you get an interview, when you go there for interview, you will be able to soak up the atmosphere, you'll be able to chat to other people who've applied, you'll have a bit of a sense of what it might be like to be in a tutorial or a supervision, and you may find that suddenly the decision becomes a lot clearer. And one final word of comfort: in all the time I've advised sixth formers about this and helped people with Oxbridge applications, I think there's only ever been one that I can remember who has regretted their decision to go there. Everybody that I've taught who's decided to apply and has got in has not regretted it, they've been happy there. Everyone I've taught who's decided not to apply and has gone somewhere else has also been happy there, and the vast majority of people who have applied but not got in have regarded it in hindsight as a bit of a blessing in disguise. And this may be because humans generally adapt to what's happened to them and find happiness with whatever life throws at them. Or it may just be that wherever you go to university, it's a really exciting, really fun experience and you will be happy. So you can't go too far wrong with this decision.